I never believed in miracles. Not really. I'd spent 32 years working as a sacristan at St. Catherine's Chapel in Providence, Rhode Island. And in all that time, I'd seen plenty of faith, plenty of devotion, plenty of people convinced they'd witnessed the supernatural. But me? I was the practical one. The one who fixed the leaking roof, replaced the candles, made sure the sound system worked for Sunday Mass. Thomas Benetti, that's my name. And I was the guy who kept Heaven's house running on Earth's terms. Until October 17th, 2023. That's the day everything I thought I knew got turned completely upside down. St. Catherine's isn't a grand cathedral. It's a modest chapel built in 1952, tucked between a Portuguese bakery and a laundromat on the east side of Providence. The neighborhood's changed over the years. What used to be entirely Italian and Portuguese families is now a beautiful mix of cultures. But the chapel remains. About 200 families still come regularly, and we've always been known for two things: the best Christmas Eve midnight Mass in the city, and our relic of Blessed Carlo Acutis. The relic came to us in 2019, just a year after Carlo's beatification cause was opened. Father Miguel, our pastor at the time, had connections in Assisi through his seminary days. When a small fragment of cloth from Carlo's red polo shirt, the one he wore in so many photographs, became available for veneration, Father Miguel moved heaven and earth to bring it to our little chapel. I remember the day it arrived. A small reliquary, maybe 4 inches tall, gold-plated with a glass window. Inside, barely the size of a dime, was a piece of red fabric with the official documentation sealed behind it. The authentication papers from the Assisi diocese were impeccable. Father Miguel placed it in a position of honor, a small alcove to the right of the main altar, illuminated by a dedicated lamp that I was responsible for keeping lit 24 hours a day. Above it, we hung a beautiful image of Carlo, that famous picture of him smiling, with his backpack, looking like any teenage kid you'd see walking to school. The young people especially loved it. Finally, they said, a saint who understood technology, who knew what it was like to grow up in the modern world. I maintained that alcove like it was my personal mission. Every Monday, I'd clean the glass, check the lamp, make sure everything was perfect. Did I believe the cloth had power? Not particularly. But I believed in doing my job right, and I believed that if something brought comfort to the families who came here, especially the kids battling cancer, the parents desperate for hope, then it deserved my best effort. The trouble started in late September 2023. The Rhode Island Department of Public Health had launched a new initiative reviewing the storage and display of human remains and relics in religious institutions. It was part of a broader regulatory update regarding biological materials in public spaces. Apparently, some synagogue in Cranston had an issue with improperly stored Torah scrolls that had human contact residue, and it snowballed into this whole thing where they decided to audit everyone. The letter arrived on a Thursday, official state letterhead, addressed to the administration of St. Catherine's Chapel. Father Antonio, who'd replaced Father Miguel 2 years earlier, brought it to me in the sacristy, his hands shaking slightly. "Thomas, read this," he said, his accent thickening with stress. Father Antonio was from Brazil, barely 40 years old, and still getting used to American bureaucracy. I read it twice. The Department of Public Health, in coordination with the Office of Religious Affairs Compliance, was requiring all religious institutions displaying human relics to submit to inspection and, if necessary, temporary removal of said relics for proper documentation and storage verification. They cited health codes, preservation standards, and public safety protocols I'd never heard of. "They can't do this," Father Antonio said. "This is a church. We have religious freedom." "They're not saying we can't have it," I explained, though my stomach was tight. "They're saying they need to verify it's being stored properly. Health and safety inspection. But it's been fine for 4 years. Regulations change, Father. It's probably nothing. They'll come, see everything's proper, and that'll be it." I was wrong. The inspection happened on October 3rd. 2 officials arrived, a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen from Public Health, and a man named Robert Fitzgerald from the state's Religious Compliance Office. Both were professional, polite, and thoroughly unmoved by Father Antonio's protests. Dr. Chen examined the reliquary with gloved hands, took photographs, measured the ambient temperature and humidity in the alcove. Fitzgerald reviewed our documentation, the authentication papers from Assisi, the chain of custody records, everything. "The documentation is in order," Fitzgerald said, making notes on his tablet. "But the display conditions don't meet the updated standards for biological material storage." "What standards?" I asked. It's in a sealed reliquary, climate-controlled building. I check it every single day. The new regulations require hermetically sealed containers with specific atmospheric controls, Dr. Chen explained. Current standards for any biological material in public access areas. This includes relics. This isn't just biological material, Father Antonio interjected, his voice rising. This is a sacred relic of a blessed. This is about faith, not health codes. Father, I understand your position, Fitzgerald said calmly. But state law applies to all facilities, regardless of religious purpose. We're not questioning the relic's authenticity or your right to have it. We're ensuring it meets contemporary preservation standards. The conversation went in circles for 20 minutes. In the end, they gave us two options. Upgrade the display to meet the new standards at an estimated cost of $8,000, or allow temporary removal of the relic to a state-approved facility where it would be properly stored until we could meet compliance requirements. $8,000. Our entire annual maintenance budget was $12,000. How temporary? I asked. 90 days, Dr. Chen said. You'd have that time to either upgrade your display system or petition for a variance based on hardship. Father Antonio looked at me. I looked at the alcove where Carlo's relic had rested for 4 years, where I'd seen children touch the glass and whisper prayers, where I'd watched teenagers light candles and ask for help with school, with family, with all the messy complications of growing up. We'll need to discuss this with the parish council, Father Antonio said finally. They gave us until October 16th to decide. If we didn't comply, they'd obtain a court order. The parish council meeting was brutal. 14 people in the church basement, everyone talking at once. Mrs. DiPietro, who'd been coming to St. Catherine's for 60 years, cried. The Medeiros family, whose daughter had been in remission from leukemia for 2 years after praying to Carlo, wanted to fight it in court. Young Marco Santos, 17 and planning to enter seminary, suggested we hide the relic. We can't hide it, I said, trying to be the voice of reason. That's illegal. And it makes us look like we're doing something wrong, which we're not. So we just let them take it? Marco demanded. Let the government walk into our church and remove a blessed relic? For 90 days, Father Antonio clarified. Thomas, what do you think? You know this building better than anyone. Everyone turned to me. I was 54 years old, had worked in this chapel my entire adult life, and I'd never felt the weight of responsibility like I did in that moment. I think, I said slowly, that we don't have $8,000. I think that fighting this in court will cost even more, money we don't have. And I think that if Carlo Acutis really is in heaven interceding for us, then 90 days in a climate-controlled facility won't change that. Mrs. DiPietro made a sound like I'd slapped her. But Father Antonio nodded slowly. Thomas is right, he said. We'll allow the temporary removal. We'll apply for the hardship variance. And we'll trust that God knows what he's doing. The vote was 8-6 in favor of compliance. The Medeiros family and Marco voted against it. Marco didn't speak to me for 3 days afterward. October 17th arrived too quickly. Dr. Chen and Fitzgerald returned at 10 in the morning, accompanied by a bonded courier service representative and a notary public. They'd brought a specialized transport container, a small silver case with foam inserts and digital monitors on the side. We'll document everything, Fitzgerald assured us. Complete photographic record, chain of custody forms, the works. This will be returned to you in the exact condition it's leaving. Father Antonio celebrated a special mass at 9 before they arrived. About 60 people came. Word had spread through the parish. People were crying, some were angry. I saw Marco in the back, his jaw set, refusing to make eye contact with me. After mass, I opened the alcove. I'd been the one to place the reliquary there 4 years ago, and it felt right that I should be the one to remove it. My hands were steadier than I expected. The reliquary was small and surprisingly light. Through the glass, I could see the tiny fragment of red cloth, the documentation beneath it. I'd looked at it thousands of times, but never really seen it. Now, knowing it was leaving, I found myself staring at it. This small piece of fabric that had touched a saint's body, that had absorbed his sweat as he worked on his computer cataloging Eucharistic miracles, that had been part of his ordinary teenage life. Ready, Mr. Benetti? Dr. Chen asked gently. I placed it in the transport case. She arranged the foam padding around it, secured the lid, and activated the environmental monitors. The digital display showed temperature, humidity, and atmospheric pressure, all in the green zone. Fitzgerald photographed everything from 6 angles. The notary documented each step. Father Antonio blessed the case, his voice thick with emotion. "We'll transport this directly to the State Preservation Facility in Warwick," Fitzgerald said. "You'll receive a full report within 48 hours, including storage location, access protocols, and the timeline for variance consideration." They walked out with it at 10:47 a.m. I know because I looked at the clock above the sacristy door and thought, this is the exact moment. This is when Carlo's relic left St. Catherine's. The alcove looked obscenely empty. The lamp was still on, illuminating nothing. The image of Carlo still smiled down, but it felt hollow now, like a photograph of someone who'd moved away. I spent the rest of the day angry at the bureaucracy, angry at the regulations, angry at my own practicality that had led us to this point. Mrs. DiPietro had been right to cry. Marco had been right to want to fight. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I knelt in front of the empty alcove and prayed. Not the rote prayers I'd memorized in childhood, but real prayer. Messy, frustrated, honest prayer. "If you're really there, Carlo," I whispered. "If you really care about this chapel, about these people who love you, do something. Show us something. Because right now, it feels like we just rolled over and let them take you away." I felt foolish immediately afterward. Here I was, 54 years old, talking to a teenager who'd been dead for 17 years, asking for a miracle like some desperate child. I locked up the chapel at 9 p.m., drove home to my apartment 3 blocks away, and slept fitfully. The next morning, October 18th, I arrived at the chapel at 6:30 a.m. as usual. Wednesday meant we had 7 a.m. Mass for the daily attendees, usually about 12 to 15 people, the faithful elderly who came rain or shine. I went through my routine, unlocked the front doors, turned on the lights, checked that the altar was prepared from the night before, verified the microphone system, walked through the pews looking for any issues. Then I went to the sacristy to prepare Father Antonio's vestments for Mass. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The early morning light coming through the stained glass window above the altar creates strange shadows sometimes. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, looked again. The reliquary was back in its alcove. I'm not talking about something similar. I'm talking about the exact same reliquary that had been removed 20 hours earlier. Gold-plated, glass window, the fragment of red cloth visible inside, sitting in the alcove under the lamp, exactly as it had been for 4 years. My first reaction wasn't wonder or joy. It was anger, hot, immediate fury. Someone was playing a prank. Marco, maybe, or one of the families who'd voted against removal. Someone had gotten a replica made, broken into the chapel overnight, and planted it there to make some kind of statement. It was disrespectful, illegal, and exactly the kind of thing that would make everything worse when the state found out. I marched to the alcove, my hands already reaching for my phone to call Father Antonio and tell him we had a problem. But then I stopped. The alcove was sealed. We'd installed a clear acrylic cover over the entire niche 3 years ago after someone tried to steal the reliquary. It had a lock, a good one, commercial grade, that only Father Antonio and I had keys to. The cover was locked, intact. No scratches, no signs of tampering. I checked my keyring. Both keys were there. Mine and the spare I kept in the sacristy safe. With shaking hands, I unlocked the acrylic cover and lifted it away. I picked up the reliquary, expecting it to be lighter, cheaper, obviously fake. It felt exactly the same. I carried it to the sacristy, turned on every light, and examined it under the bright fluorescent bulbs. The gold plating had the same tiny scratch near the base that had been there since we received it. I'd caused it myself in 2020 when I bumped it against a candlestick. The glass had the same almost imperceptible imperfection in the upper right corner, a tiny bubble in the glass that had always been there. The documentation inside was identical. Same paper, same seal, same handwriting from the Assisi diocesan official. And the cloth, the red cloth fragment. It was positioned exactly as I remembered it. Slightly diagonal, one corner more visible than the others. This wasn't a replica. This was the same reliquary that had been removed yesterday morning. My phone rang. Father Antonio, his morning check-in call before Mass. "Thomas, good morning. Everything ready for—" "Father, you need to come to the chapel right now." "What's wrong? Is there—" "The reliquary is back." Silence on the line. Then, "What?" "The reliquary. Carlo's relic. It's back in the alcove. I'm looking at it right now." "Thomas, that's impossible. We watched them take it yesterday." "I know that, Father. I'm telling you it's here." He arrived in 8 minutes. Must have run the whole way from the rectory. He burst through the sacristy door, still in his jogging clothes, and I handed him the reliquary. He examined it exactly as I had, turning it over, looking for any sign that it was different. His hands were shaking worse than mine. "This is the same one," he whispered. "Santa Maria, this is the same one." "The acrylic cover was locked," I said. "No one broke in. The alarm system shows no breaches overnight. I checked while I was waiting for you." Father Antonio set the reliquary down on the sacristy table and pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Fitzgerald. Right now." "Father, wait." "Wait?" "Thomas, either someone broke in and committed a crime, or—" He stopped, looking at the reliquary, then at me. "Or we're dealing with something else." He called Fitzgerald's office, got voicemail, left a message that probably sounded insane. "Mr. Fitzgerald, this is Father Antonio Silva from St. Catherine's Chapel. The reliquary you removed yesterday has reappeared in the chapel. This is not a prank. Please call me back immediately." Then he called Dr. Chen. Same result, same message. "We need to verify it's really the same one," I said. "The serial numbers, the documentation codes, everything they photographed yesterday. We need to prove this is the exact same reliquary before anyone accuses us of fraud." Father Antonio nodded. "The transport case. Fitzgerald gave us the documentation package yesterday. It's in my office." We practically ran to the rectory. Father Antonio's office was its usual organized chaos. Books, papers, his laptop with 17 browser tabs open. He found the folder immediately. St. Catherine's Relic Transport. Official documentation. Inside were copies of everything. Photographs from 6 angles. The serial number etched into the base of the reliquary. RC 2019 AC 0847. Detailed description of the authentication papers inside, including the signature of Monsignor Stefano Russo from the Assisi Diocese. Measurements: 4.2 inches tall, 2.1 inches wide. Weight: 3.4 ounces. We brought the folder back to the chapel and did a point-by-point comparison. Serial number: RC 2019 AC 847. Match. Height: 4.2 inches. Match. Width: 2.1 inches. Match. Weight. I put it on the postal scale we used for mailings. 3.4 ounces. Match. The documentation inside, visible through the glass, we could see Monsignor Russo's signature, the Assisi Diocesan seal, the date of authentication, March 15, 2019, all matching the photographs from yesterday. The tiny scratch on the base, the bubble in the glass, even the way the red cloth fragment was positioned, identical to the photos taken 21 hours earlier. "Thomas," Father Antonio said quietly, "I think we need to sit down." We sat in the front pew, the reliquary between us. 7 a.m. was approaching. Mrs. DiPietro would arrive soon for daily mass, and then she'd see it, and then everyone would know. "What do we do?" I asked. Father Antonio was quiet for a long time. "I don't know," he finally said. "I've been a priest for 15 years. I've studied theology, philosophy, church history. I know what the official position is on miracles. Investigate carefully, assume natural causes until proven otherwise, never rush to supernatural explanations. But I also know what I'm looking at. This is the same reliquary, the exact same one. The state of Rhode Island transported it to a secure facility in Warwick. The chain of custody documentation is ironclad, and somehow it's here." "Somehow," I repeated. The word felt inadequate. At 6:58 a.m., Mrs. DiPietro came through the front door. She was 76, walked with a cane, never missed daily mass. She made it halfway up the aisle before she saw the alcove. She stopped dead, stared, made the sign of the cross slowly. "Father," she called out, her voice shaking. "Father Antonio, I'm seeing things." "No, Mrs. DiPietro," Father Antonio said gently. "You're not." By the time mass started at 7, 4 more people had arrived, and all of them had seen it. The news spread like wildfire. I had to silence my phone because the texts and calls wouldn't stop. Father Antonio celebrated mass in a daze. His homily lasted 2 minutes. He couldn't seem to find words. We all took communion in silence, but I could feel the electricity in the air, the sense that something inexplicable had occurred. At 8:15 a.m., my phone rang. Fitzgerald. I stepped into the sacristy to take the call. "Mr. Benetti, I got Father Silva's message. Let me be very clear. What you're suggesting is impossible." "I know it's impossible," I said. "I'm looking at it anyway." "Then someone made a replica. That's the only logical explanation." "Mr. Fitzgerald, come and see for yourself." Bring your documentation. Compare the serial numbers. I think you need to verify this in person. He was silent for a moment. I'll be there in 45 minutes. Don't touch anything. He arrived at 9 with Dr. Chen and 2 Providence police officers. The officers looked confused about why they were there. Fitzgerald looked skeptical. Dr. Chen looked curious. I met them at the entrance and led them directly to the alcove. Fitzgerald pulled out his tablet with the photos from yesterday. He examined the reliquary for 10 minutes without saying a word, compared serial numbers, checked the scratch, the glass bubble, the documentation inside, took out a jeweler's loupe and examined the gold plating in minute detail. Finally, he looked at Dr. Chen. It's the same one. That's impossible, one of the police officers said. You transported it to Warwick yesterday. It's in a secure facility. That's what I thought, Fitzgerald said. He pulled out his phone and called someone. This is Robert Fitzgerald, Religious Compliance. I need you to physically verify the location of item RC 2019 AC 847 in Building C, Section 12, Storage Unit 47. Right now. I'll hold. We all waited in silence. The chapel felt too quiet, too tense. A voice came through the phone, tinny but audible. Mr. Fitzgerald? I'm at Unit 47. The transport case is here, sealed, all monitors showing green. Open it, Fitzgerald said. Sir, that requires dual authorization. I'm giving you authorization. This is a priority verification. Open it now. We heard sounds of movement, electronic beeps, a lock disengaging. Then, Mr. Fitzgerald, the case is empty. The transport foam is here, but there's no reliquary inside. Fitzgerald's face went pale. That's impossible. The case was sealed. The monitors would have alerted if it was opened. Sir, I'm looking at the monitors now. They show no breach, but the case is definitely empty. Fitzgerald ended the call and looked at Father Antonio and me. I need to sit down. We took them to the rectory, made coffee that no one drank. The police officers took statements, though they seemed at a loss for what to write down. Dr. Chen kept examining her phone, reading something. There are documented cases, she said quietly, in church history. Relics that moved themselves. Bodies of saints that resisted decay or relocated. The church has investigated these phenomena for centuries. Dr. Chen, one officer said, are you suggesting this is supernatural? I'm suggesting, she said carefully, that I'm a scientist, and I can't explain what we're looking at. The case was sealed, environmentally monitored, in a secure facility. This reliquary is identical in every measurable way to the one we transported yesterday. The only logical conclusion is that they're the same object. Which is impossible, Fitzgerald added. Which is impossible, Dr. Chen agreed. Yet here we are. The officers filed their report and left, clearly uncomfortable. Fitzgerald spent another hour examining the chapel's security system, the locks, the acrylic cover. He found no evidence of break-in, no signs of tampering, nothing that would explain how anyone could have accessed the alcove. By noon, the story had hit local news. By evening, it was on regional news. By the next morning, we had reporters from Boston, New York, and even one from CNN camped outside the chapel. The Diocese of Providence sent a delegation, including the Chancellor and the Judicial Vicar. They spent 2 days investigating, interviewing everyone, examining the documentation. Their conclusion was cautious but clear. While we cannot definitively explain the events at St. Catherine's Chapel, we find no evidence of fraud or deception. The matter has been referred to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints for further examination if deemed appropriate. The state of Rhode Island quietly dropped its requirement for the relic's removal. New regulations were drafted that included exemptions for authenticated relics under specific circumstances. Fitzgerald resigned from his position 3 months later. I heard through the grapevine that the whole experience had shaken him badly. But none of that is really the point of this story. The point is, what happened to me? I spent 54 years being practical, rational, the guy who fixed problems with tools and common sense. I believed in God the way you believe in gravity. It's there. It works. No need to think too deeply about it. Miracles were stories from the Bible, not things that happened in Providence, Rhode Island, in 2023. And then I watched something impossible happen. Not in a story, not in a medieval legend, but in my chapel, with my own eyes, with documentation and witnesses, and every possible verification. The reliquary came back. There's no natural explanation. None. I've spent 6 months going over every detail, looking for the logical answer, the reasonable solution. It doesn't exist. Carlo Acutis, a 15-year-old kid who died in 2006, who loved his computer and his mother and the Eucharist, somehow from heaven, moved his relic back to where it belonged. A sealed case in a secure facility in Warwick, Rhode Island, was emptied without triggering any alarms. A locked alcove in a chapel was filled without anyone entering. The exact same reliquary, verified by serial numbers and microscopic details, was in two places at once, and then it chose where it wanted to be. I can't explain it. I've given up trying, but I can tell you what it changed. I'm not the practical guy anymore. Oh, I still fix the leaking roof and replace the candles. Someone has to. But now, when I unlock the chapel at 6:30 in the morning and walk past that alcove, I stop. Every single day I stop and look at the reliquary. And I remember that impossible is a word we use when we don't have enough faith. Marcos Santos is in seminary now. He's going to be ordained in 4 years, God willing. He tells people that October 17th was the day he knew for certain that God was real, that heaven was real, that the saints were real and active and cared about small chapels in Providence. Mrs. DiPietro still comes to daily mass. She brings her great-grandchildren now, and she tells them about the morning she walked into St. Catherine's and saw proof that miracles happen. The Medeiros family's daughter is still in remission. She's 12 now, healthy and strong, and she wants to be a doctor. She tells everyone about the Blessed who watches over her. We installed a new lamp in the alcove. Brighter, better. I check it every day, and sometimes I whisper, "Thank you for coming back, Carlo. Thank you for choosing us." Because that's the real miracle, isn't it? Not just that the reliquary returned, but that it wanted to return. That a teenage saint in heaven looked down at a struggling little chapel in Providence and said essentially, "No, this is where I belong. This is where I'm staying." The state of Rhode Island learned that day that some things are beyond regulations. The diocese learned that God still moves in unexpected ways. And I learned that the practical guy, the skeptic, the one who thought he had everything figured out, I learned that I didn't know anything at all. Every Sunday now, the chapel is full. People come from all over New England to see the relic, to pray to Carlo, to light candles and ask for help. Young people especially. They line up to touch the glass, to ask this teenage saint who understood computers and social media and modern life to intercede for them. And I watch them, and I think about that morning when I walked in and found the impossible sitting in its alcove, and I think, this is what faith actually is. Not the comfortable certainty of routine prayers and Sunday obligations. Real faith is standing in front of something that shouldn't exist, something that defies every rational explanation, and saying, "Yes, I believe. Show me more." Father Antonio celebrated a special Mass of Thanksgiving 3 months after the event. The chapel was so packed that people stood outside in the November cold, watching through the open doors. In his homily, he said something I think about often. God doesn't need to prove himself to us. He doesn't owe us miracles. But sometimes, out of pure love, he gives them anyway. Not to convince the skeptics, because skeptics will always find reasons to doubt, but to encourage the faithful, to remind us that we're not alone, that heaven is real, and closer than we think. I'm not a theologian. I can't give you fancy explanations about divine intervention or supernatural physics. I'm just Thomas Benetti, the guy who keeps the chapel running. But I can tell you this. I held that reliquary in my hands on October 17th and watched it leave the building. And I held the exact same reliquary in my hands on October 18th, after it had been documented in a sealed case 20 miles away. That's my testimony. That's what I witnessed. And for the rest of my life, whenever anyone asks me if miracles are real, I'm going to tell them about the morning Carlo Acutis came back to St. Catherine's Chapel and chose to stay with us. Because sometimes, heaven reminds earth that the impossible is just another word for God's possibility. And sometimes, a blessed 15-year-old in heaven decides that a little chapel in Providence is exactly where his relic should be, and no amount of regulations or rational explanations can change that. I still clean that alcove every Monday. I still check the lamp, make sure the glass is spotless, verify that everything is perfect. But now, I do it with different hands. Hands that have held the impossible. Hands that have touched mystery. Hands that know beyond any doubt that there's more to this world than what we can measure and explain. The reporters stopped coming after a few weeks. The investigation concluded with its careful qualified statements. Life at St. Catherine's returned to something like normal, except for the steady stream of pilgrims, the increased attendance at Mass, the young people who discovered Carlo and found in him a saint who speaks their language. But every morning, when I unlock those doors and see the lamp still burning in the alcove, I say a prayer. Not the rote prayers I learned as a child. Real prayers. Honest prayers. Thank you prayers. Thank you for the mystery. Thank you for the miracle. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for proving that heaven sees us, knows us, cares about us enough to break the laws of physics and make a point. Thank you, Carlo, for coming back, and thank you for staying. If this story has touched your heart, I encourage you to learn more about Blessed Carlo Acutis and consider asking for his intercession in your own prayers. And if you'd like to hear more testimonies of faith like this one, please subscribe to this channel, leave a like, and turn on notifications. Because miracles happen every day, and sometimes they happen in the most unexpected places.